The courtroom hummed as Judge Victor Hargrove slammed his gavel, sentencing 19-year-old Kiana Brooks to 30 days for disrupting public order at a protest, his lips curling into a smug grin as he sneered, "Thug in braids." She stared back unshaken, then dropped a bomb. "I'm not just a kid, Your Honor. I'm an attorney here to bury you." Gasps exploded, his face contorted, but she vowed to dismantle his corrupt empire. What scandal could topple him? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe, because tomorrow's episode will leave you speechless. Kiana Brooks stood in the shadow of Detroit's grimiest courthouse, a hulking concrete slab stained with decades of soot and neglect, her worn sneakers planted firm on the chipped tile floor as Judge Victor Hargrove loomed above her from his bench, his silver hair glinting under the flickering fluorescent lights like some tarnished crown. She was 19, a prodigy who'd clawed her way through law school by 18, passing the bar with a score that made her professors blink twice. But none of that mattered here, not yet. She'd gone undercover for the Midwest Justice Coalition, her scrappy group of activists and attorneys hell-bent on rooting out corruption in the city's legal system. And Hargrove was their white whale, a 30-year veteran whose rulings crushed black lives like a millstone grinding wheat into dust. Kiana had slipped into the role of a protester 3 days ago, joining a rally outside a shuttered community center where cops had beaten a 16-year-old black kid for holding a sign that read, "Stop killing us." She'd watched the baton crack against his skull, blood pooling on the pavement, and when the officer turned to her, she'd asked one question, sharp and clear. "What's he being charged with?" That was it, one sentence, but it was enough to get her tackled. Her wrists zip-tied so tight her fingers went numb, and hauled into this courtroom on a trumped-up charge of disrupting public order. Now Hargrove peered down at her, his eyes narrow slits behind thick glasses, his voice a gravelly drawl as he flipped through her file without really reading it, muttering, "Another loudmouth wasting my time." The room smelled of stale coffee and desperation, packed with spectators who slouched in creaky wooden pews, some chewing gum, others whispering bets on how fast she'd fold. Kiana's jeans were frayed at the knees, her blouse a plain grey cotton number she'd picked from a thrift bin to sell the part, but her spine was steel, her chin tilted up as she locked eyes with the man who'd built his throne on broken futures. He'd mocked her in that first clash, called her a thug in braids before slamming the gavel on her 30-day sentence. But she'd turned the tables with her bombshell, "I'm an attorney here to bury you." And now the air crackled. With the aftershock, a stunned silence broken only by the rustle of papers, as the prosecutor, a wiry guy named Edwin Voss with a permanent smirk, shuffled his notes like he'd been caught napping. Hargrove's face had gone from smug to sour, his jowls quivering as he leaned forward, spitting, "You think a fancy degree scares me, girl?" Kiana didn't flinch, her voice cutting through the room like a blade honed on late-night study sessions and cold pizza. "No, Your Honor, but the law might." She rattled off case law like a machine gun, her words precise and loaded. Terry v. Ohio, 1968. Supreme Court ruled detentions require reasonable suspicion, not just an officer's whim. And Graham v. Connor, 1989. Excessive force violates the Fourth Amendment, which that baton-happy cop out there clearly forgot. The crowd shifted, a low hum rippling through them as her knowledge landed. But Hargrove wasn't about to let some kid school him in his own kingdom. His fingers drummed the bench, a lazy tattoo of impatience, and he snorted. "Cute, but you're..." Still in contempt, mouthing off like that. He jabbed a bony finger toward the bailiffs, two burly guys in faded uniforms who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, and barked, "Take her downstairs, no bail, let her cool off in a cell, till she learns respect." Kiana's lips twitched, not quite a smile as she squared her shoulders. "Respect's earned, not demanded, and you're running low." The room erupted, gasps and chuckles clashing like thunder, but Hargrove's gavel came down again, a sharp crack that silenced the noise, his glare promising something darker than a 30-day stint. The bailiffs grabbed her arms, their grips iron-tight, and she felt the cold bite of metal cuffs snap around her wrists again, a familiar sting from the rally, But this time it was personal, Hargrove's way of flexing his muscle, showing her who ruled this rotting corner of Detroit. As they dragged her toward the side door, her braids swung defiantly, catching the light, and she caught a glimpse of Voss, the prosecutor, scribbling something fast, his smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of unease. The spectators jeered, some hurling slurs that bounced off her like rain on asphalt. Troublemaker, know-it-all. But others sat wide-eyed, phones sneaking out of pockets to snap pictures of the girl who dared to talk back. Kiana's mind raced as the bailiffs shoved her down a narrow hallway, the walls peeling with mold, the air thick with the tang of sweat and despair. She'd expected pushback, sure, but not this fast, not this hard. Hargrove doubling down like a cornered dog baring its teeth. Her coalition had drilled her for months, feeding her dossiers on his rulings. 30 years of sentences that hit, black defendants like a sledgehammer, while white kids got slaps on the wrist, a pattern so blatant it screamed from the pages of every transcript she'd memorized. She'd come here to poke the bear, to get him on record, to start the slow bleed of his reputation, but now she was the one locked in his cage, and he wasn't playing subtle. The cell door loomed ahead, a rusted slab of steel, and she stumbled. As one bailiff gave her a rough push, her shoulder slamming into the frame, pain flaring hot and quick. "Move it," he grunted, his breath sour with tobacco, and she bit back a retort, saving her ammo for the next round. The door clanged shut behind her, the lock grinding into place, and she stood alone in the dim light, the floor sticky with grime, a single bulb buzzing overhead like a trapped fly. She rubbed her wrists, the cuffs off, but the marks still red, and took a slow breath, her pulse steady despite the chaos. Hargrove thought he'd won this one, thought he'd slapped her down and shut her up, but he didn't know her, didn't know the fire she'd carried since she was 12, watching her cousin get hauled off for jaywalking while a white kid, with weed in his pocket, walked free. She'd sworn then, on a cracked stoop under a buzzing streetlight, that she'd fight this system, tear it apart brick by brick, and Hargrove was just the first wall she'd crack. Her reveal in court had been the opening shot, a spark to light the fuse, and even now, trapped in this stinking hole, she could feel the ripples spreading, the coalition already moving, the plan shifting into gear. She leaned against the damp wall, the chill seeping through her blouse, and let her mind sharpen, replaying every word Hargrove had spat, every sneer, every flex of his gavel. He'd mocked her degree, her age, her braids, but that was his mistake, underestimating the girl he'd pegged as just another statistic. She'd studied law not for prestige, not for money, but for this, for moments like these, where she could stand toe-to-toe with giants and watch them stumble. The cell was a setback, sure, but it wasn't the end, not even close. She slid a hand into her pocket, feeling the tiny notebook she'd tucked there, her pen still clipped to the binding, and smirked. They hadn't searched her well enough, hadn't thought she'd have anything worth taking, and that was their first slip. She pulled it out, flipping to a blank page, and started scribbling. The scratch of ink on paper, a quiet rebellion in the silence, notes on Hargrove's words, the bailiff's roughness, the crowd's split reaction, all of it ammo for what came next. She'd get out, she always did, and when she did, Hargrove would feel the weight of every page she filled. The judge had ruled this city's courts like a dictator, his bench a fortress, but Kiana wasn't here to beg for mercy. She was here to storm the gates, and this was just the beginning of his unraveling. Kiana Brooks slumped against the cell wall, her fingers smudged with ink from the notebook she'd filled with every detail of Judge Victor Hargrove's courtroom tantrum, the damp concrete chilling her spine through her thin grey blouse as the single bulb overhead flickered like a dying moth. The air stank of mildew and rust, the floor a patchwork of grime that stuck to her sneakers, but her mind was a furnace, burning through strategies while the hours crawled by in that filthy Detroit lockup. She'd been tossed in here for contempt, a 30-day sentence stretched into indefinite limbo with no bail, Hargrove's way of grinding her down, but she wasn't the type to crumble. She'd grown up in the shadow of crumbling brick tenements, her mom working double shifts at a diner to pay for the textbooks Kiana devoured, and every page she'd turned had been a brick in the wall she'd built against men like Hargrove. Now locked away, she scribbled furiously, Her pen carving out the bailiff's rough hands, the jeering crowd, the judge's sneer, all of it fuel for the fire she'd ignite. What could she do from a cage? She'd already tipped the first domino in court, outing herself as an attorney, and the Midwest Justice Coalition didn't waste time. Her phone, confiscated at booking, had held encrypted messages, but her team was sharp, and by dawn they'd cracked into action. Outside, the city buzzed as the coalition leaked her bar credentials to a local activist blog, a single post titled "Teen Attorney Jailed by Corrupt Judge" that ricocheted across social media like a gunshot in a quiet street. Screenshots of her license, her law school diploma from Wayne State at 18, spread like wildfire, hashtags blooming, and "Free Kiana" in a Hargrove must fall. By noon, protesters clogged the courthouse steps, a sea of fists and signs, "Justice for Tati." Kiana scrawled in red paint, their chants rattling the windows of Hargrove's chambers 3 stories up. News vans rolled in, tires crunching gravel, cameras catching the swell of bodies, and a reporter with a mic thrust into the crowd caught a grandmother's shout, "That judge been locking up our babies too long." Kiana, stuck in her cell, didn't hear it, but she felt the shift, the walls trembling faintly as the noise seeped through, a lifeline she couldn't grab yet. How long could Hargrove ignore a storm like that? Not long, it turned out. By mid-afternoon, the coalition's legal arm filed an emergency petition, citing unlawful detention, and the media heat-scorched Hargrove's backside. Up in his office, he paced, his polished shoes scuffing the carpet, sweat beading on his forehead as his clerk stammered updates. "Sir, they're calling you a racist on live TV." His phone buzzed with calls from the governor's office, a curt voice warning, "Fix this before it's national news." Hargrove's jaw tightened, his pride a jagged rock in his throat, but he had no choice. He stormed back to the bench, his robe flapping like a vulture's wings, and barked an order to release her, his voice thick with venom as he muttered to the bailiff, "Get that girl out of my sight." Downstairs, the cell door groaned open, and Kiana stepped out, her braids swinging, her eyes blazing with a triumph she could taste. The bailiff shoved her release papers into her hands, grunting, "You're lucky," but she shot back, "No, you're sloppy." She walked out into the late afternoon sun, the air crisp and biting, the crowd roaring as she emerged, a tiny figure in jeans and a blouse against a tide of support. Phones flashed, capturing her raised fist, and for a moment she let herself breathe, the weight of the cell lifting her victory sharp and sweet. Hargrove's sneer echoed from the courtroom. "Enjoy your 15 minutes," but she'd stretched it into hours, the city's pulse quickening with her name. She crashed at a friend's place, a cramped apartment 5 blocks from the courthouse, planning to regroup, when she pushed open the door and froze. The room was a wreckage, couch cushions slashed, glass from a shattered lamp crunching underfoot, books she'd left on the table torn to confetti. Spray paint scarred the walls, bold. Red letters screaming, "Go back to the hood," the words dripping like blood onto the floorboards. Her breath caught, her pulse hammering as she stepped deeper, spotting a folded note on the coffee table untouched amid the chaos. She snatched it up, unfolding it with trembling fingers, and read the scrawl. "This is just the start, KVH." Hargrove's initials stared back at her, a taunt, a promise, and the air turned heavy, her triumph souring into something jagged and cold. Who could hit her this fast, this hard? She sank onto the ruined couch, the springs groaning, and ran her hands over her face, the cheers from the courthouse fading into a distant hum. Her phone, returned with her release, buzzed non-stop, texts. From the coalition. "You okay?" "We're digging deeper." But none of them knew this yet, this personal stab from a man who'd already caged her once. She'd humiliated him in his own court, turned his gavel into a toy, and now he'd struck back, not with law but with something dirtier, something that reeked of his fingerprints even if he'd never held the spray can himself. The apartment wasn't just trashed, it was a message, a line drawn in the sand, and Kiana felt the weight of it settle into her bones. She'd walked out of that cell thinking she'd scored a point, but Hargrove wasn't playing for points. He was playing for blood, and this was his opening move. Her sister's voice echoed in her head, a call from last week. "Be careful, Kai. These people don't lose quiet." And she'd laughed it off, but now the laughter stuck in her throat. She stood, pacing the wreckage, her sneakers kicking aside splintered wood, and grabbed her notebook from her pocket, flipping to a fresh page. She wrote fast, detailing the paint, the note, the timing, her mind racing to connect it back to him, to prove it wasn't random. Could she tie this to Hargrove before he hit again? The coalition had his rulings, his stats, but this was new, a shadow game she hadn't prepped for, and it chilled her more than the cell ever could. She'd wanted to crack his empire, but now it was cracking back, and the stakes weren't just her freedom anymore. They were her life, her sanity, everything she'd built. She stopped, staring at the note again, those initials like a brand, and clenched her fist, the paper crumpling. He'd underestimated her once, and she'd made him pay, but this time he'd come prepared, and the war she'd started was about to get uglier than she'd ever imagined. Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Hargrove's gone too. Far trashing Kiana's place, or number 2 if you'd fight back like she's planning. Hit that like button if you're rooting for her to take him down, and subscribe because this story's just heating up. Trust me, you won't want to miss her next move. So, what's Kiana got up her sleeve to flip this mess back on Hargrove, and how's he gonna top this attack? Stick around to find out. Kiana Brooks stood on a makeshift stage outside Detroit's courthouse, a splintered wooden crate scavenged from an alley, her sneakers planted firm as a brisk wind whipped her braids across her shoulders, the late October chill biting through. Her grey blouse still dusted with plaster from her ruined apartment. The crowd stretched across the cracked plaza, 300 strong, a restless mosaic of black faces and a few white allies, their signs bobbing like buoys in a storm. Hargrove. Hates us and Kiana speaks truth, scrawled in marker and paint. She'd barely slept, the image of red letters dripping down her walls searing her mind. Hargrove's initials on that note, a splinter she couldn't pull out, but she'd turned that fury into fuel, rallying her supporters at dawn after crashing. On a friend's couch, the coalition buzzing around her like bees on a hive. Her voice boomed through a borrowed megaphone, raw and unshaken. Judge Victor Hargrove's been jailing black teens for breathing while white kids walk free with blood on their hands. She'd spent the night with Marcus, a wiry lawyer from the coalition with a chipped tooth and a knack for digging dirt, poring over court records they'd smuggled out in PDF scans, a grim tally of Hargrove's reign. 16-year-old Jamal got 90 days for loitering. White frat boy Chad got a warning for the same. Tanisha, 17, pulled 6 months for a loud argument, her white neighbor a handshake for a fistfight. Kiana thrust the stats into the air, pages fluttering. This isn't justice, it's a plantation, and Hargrove's the overseer. The crowd roared, fists pumping, a pulse of rage and hope that shook the concrete. And she felt it in her chest, a swell that drowned out the ache of last night's violation. A local news crew, Channel 8, rolled up late, their van's tires, squealing, and caught her mid-sentence. He's a king in a crumbling castle and we're the ones tearing it down. The reporter, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a mic, shoved it toward Kiana, camera rolling live, and her words crackled. Across the city, screens flickering in barbershops and living rooms as her face filled the frame, braids swinging, eyes fierce. Donations pinged into the coalition's account, $5 here, 20 there. A flood of small bills from people who'd never met her but knew her fight. Marcus, hovering at her elbow, grinned. We've got enough for a real lawsuit now, and filed an emergency motion to dismiss her disrupting public order charge, citing unlawful arrest, the paperwork hitting the clerk's desk before noon. Kiana stood taller, the megaphone trembling in her grip. We're not asking for mercy, we're demanding what's ours. The plaza erupted again, a thunderclap of voices, and for a moment she believed they'd cracked Hargrove's armor, the courthouse looming behind her like a beast with a limp. She pictured him up there, stewing in his chambers, his silver hair plastered with sweat, and it felt good, damn good, until the tide turned. Hargrove didn't sit idle, didn't lick his wounds. He struck back with a venom that made her apartment look like child's play. By dusk, as the crowd thinned and Kiana grabbed a water bottle from Marcus, her phone lit up with a notification, a link from an unknown number. She clicked it, and her stomach dropped. A grainy video, time-stamped from the rally 3 days ago. showed her shouting at the cop who'd cracked that kid's skull, but now it was edited, her voice distorted to scream, "I'll kill you." As she lunged, a fabricated shove slamming the officer back. Her real question, "What's he being charged with?" was gone, replaced by a lie that painted her as a raging thug. The video hit every local news site within an hour, Channel 8 included, the headline screaming, "Attorney or assailant?" Kiana Brooks caught on tape. Hargrove's fingerprints were all over it, no initials needed this time, his network of cronies spinning the web while he sat back, smirking from his bench. The crowd's cheers faded as phones buzzed, people, glancing at her then away, whispers cutting through the cold air. Is that real? She's crazy. Kiana's throat tightened, her victory dissolving like sugar in rain, and Marcus grabbed her arm. "We can fight this. It's fake." But the damage was done. Her inbox flooded with death threats, raw and unfiltered. "You're dead, bitch. Stay out of Detroit," each one a knife twisting deeper. She scrolled, numb, as the plaza emptied, leaving her with Marcus and a handful of diehards, the wind howling through the gaps. How had he turned her voice into a weapon against her? She'd rallied them, lit a spark, and now Hargrove had doused it with gasoline, watching it burn from a distance. The news van peeled out, chasing the next story, and Kiana sank onto the crate, her sneakers scuffing the pavement, the megaphone dead in her lap. Marcus paced, muttering about counterfilings, but she barely heard him. Her mind replaying the video, the edit so seamless it fooled her own eyes for a split second. Hargrove hadn't just trashed her place, he'd trashed her name. And this wasn't a warning anymore, it was war. She'd humiliated him twice now, first in court, then out here, and he'd answered with a blow that didn't just sting, it bled. Her sister's diner flashed in her mind, the one spot she'd kept safe, and a chill crawled up her spine, wondering if he'd hit there next. She stood, shoving the phone into her pocket, and grabbed Marcus by the sleeve. "We need more than a dismissal, we need his head." He nodded, eyes hard. "Then we dig deeper, hit him where it hurts." Kiana clenched her fists, the threat still buzzing, each one a dare she'd answer. But the weight of it pressed down, heavier than the cell, heavier than the paint on her walls. Hargrove wasn't just a judge. He was a machine. And she'd kicked it into overdrive, its gears grinding toward her with a precision she hadn't seen coming. She'd rallied a city, sure, but now half of it hated her, and the other half was scared silent, leaving her exposed on a battlefield she'd drawn herself. The courthouse loomed darker now, its windows black slits like eyes watching her stumble, and she knew this was just round two, Hargrove's opening salvo in a fight he'd never let her win easy. She kicked the crate aside, wood splintering, and turned to Marcus. "Let's move, he's not done and neither am I." Her voice steady but her pulse racing, the taste of victory gone, replaced by the bitter sting of a trap she'd walked right into. Kiana Brooks hunched over a rickety table in a borrowed office, a closet-sized room above a barbershop on Detroit's east side, the air thick with the buzz of clippers drifting up through the floorboards as she pored over stacks of yellowed court transcripts with Marcus, their eyes bloodshot from 3 nights of no sleep. Her grey blouse hung loose, stained with coffee rings, her braids pulled into a messy knot as she traced a finger down a column of numbers, each one a scar from Judge Victor Hargrove's 30-year reign. They'd moved fast after the rally's collapse, the doctored video still burning through the city like a plague, her name now a curse on half the lips in town. But Kiana wasn't running. She was digging. Marcus flipped a page, his chipped tooth glinting as he muttered, "Here's another. Black kid 17, 6 months for a busted taillight. White guy, same age, community service for a DUI. She nodded, scribbling it down. Her notebook a war map of Hargrove's bias, the stats piling up like bodies. Black defendants got triple the sentences of white ones for identical crimes, sometimes. 4 times, a pattern so stark it screamed from the ink. She'd seen it growing up. Her cousins 2 years for a joint while a white classmate bragged about probation for the same. But now it was personal. Hargrove's gavel aimed at her skull. They worked in shifts, Marcus hacking into public records, while Kiana cross-checked cases, their laptops humming on a diet of cheap extension cords, the room lit by a single swaying bulb, that cast shadows like ghosts on the peeling walls. By dawn they had it. A dossier thick as a phone book. 80 cases over 10 years, stats showing Hargrove sentenced black teens to an average of 18 months for misdemeanors, white teens averaging 3, a gap no law could justify. Kiana slammed the table, wood creaking. "This is our grenade, we pull the pin now." Marcus filed a federal lawsuit that morning, alleging judicial misconduct and systemic racism, the papers hitting the clerk's desk with a thud that echoed up to Hargrove's chambers, a direct shot at his bench. Kiana felt the rush, her pulse hammering as she pictured him squirming, his silver hair matted with sweat, his empire wobbling under the weight of her numbers. The coalition leaked the suit to a sympathetic reporter, and by noon, headlines blared. Judge Hargrove sued for racial bias. Her name back in the light, not as a thug but a warrior. She stood at the barbershop window, watching cars slow on the street below, drivers craning necks as word spread, and for the first time since the video, she grinned, thinking they'd landed a blow he couldn't dodge. A hearing was set for next week, the fastest Marcus had ever seen a federal judge move, and Kiana walked out of that office with her head high, her sneakers slapping the pavement, believing she'd turned the tide. What could stop her now? She was wrong. Hargrove didn't flinch, didn't retreat, he pounced, and his counterstrike was a blade she never saw coming. That afternoon, as she grabbed a sandwich from a corner deli, her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Turn on the news now." She fumbled it on, the screen flaring with a live feed from the courthouse. Prosecutor Edwin Voss at a podium, his wiry frame taut, his smirk back as he waved a sheaf of papers. Kiana Brooks fabricated evidence in her frivolous lawsuit and, "We're charging her with felony perjury." The crowd gasped, cameras flashing, and Kiana's sandwich hit the floor, mustard smearing her sneaker as Voss kept going. Her so-called stats are lies, cooked up to smear a respected judge. Her chest tightened, the deli spinning as she scrolled X posts exploding. "She's a fraud." "Lock her up." The city flipping again, her name dirtier than ever. Hargrove had flipped the script, not with a video this time, but a legal. Noose and Voss was the hangman. She bolted back to the barbershop, Marcus pacing. It's a setup, they cherry-picked typos to call it fraud, but before they could strategize, tires screeched outside. She peeked through the blinds, heart sinking as cop cars swarmed, lights pulsing red and blue, a dozen officers spilling out, boots stomping the sidewalk. They'd tracked her, and now they were here, not for a summons, but an arrest. Hargrove's, orders ringing in their ears. The barbers downstairs went quiet, clippers stilled, as shouts echoed up, "Kiana Brooks, come out now!" She grabbed the dossier, stuffing it into a backpack, but Marcus hissed. Too late, as the door splintered under a battering ram, wood shards flying. Cops stormed in, guns drawn, one slamming her against the wall, her cheek grinding plaster, cuffs snapping tight as they yanked her arms back, the dossier spilling across the floor. "You're done, liar," a cop snarled, his breath hot on her neck, and she twisted, spitting. "Check your boss's math, not mine." They didn't listen, dragging her out mid-interview with a blogger who'd snuck up to record, her phone tumbling as Kiana's voice cut off. "This is Hargrove's trap, don't let him—" The blogger posted it live, shaky footage of her arrest rocketing online. But the damage was done, the city watching her hauled off in cuffs again, her lawsuit drowned in Voss's lies. She'd thought she'd pinned Hargrove, her evidence a spear in his side, but he'd turned it into a cage, locking her back in his game. The squad car roared off, her face pressed to the glass, the barbershop shrinking as sirens wailed, and she realized he'd baited her, let her swing so he could snap the rope. Her backpack lay trampled upstairs, pages fluttering in the draft, and she knew this wasn't just retaliation, it was a burial, Hargrove's way of proving he could crush her louder than she'd ever risen. The cop in front sneered, "Should have stayed in school, kid," and she bit back a laugh, the irony sour because school had brought her here, and now it was her coffin. She'd landed a punch, sure, but Hargrove had a whole arsenal, and this felony charge was a missile aimed at her spine, her freedom, her fight, everything she'd built. The car jolted over potholes, the city blurring past, and Kiana's mind raced, replaying Voss's smug face, the cop's quick raid, Hargrove's invisible hand pulling strings. She'd sued him. exposed him, and now she was the one in chains. The hearing a week away now a distant dream, her victory a ghost she couldn't grab. How had he spun her truth into this lie so fast? She'd underestimated his reach, his rot running deeper than the courthouse, into precincts, newsrooms, everywhere she turned, and this arrest wasn't the end. It was a warning of worse to come. Comment. Number 1. If you think Hargrove's framing Kiana with fake charges is pure evil, or number 2 if you'd have run instead of fighting back. Smash that like button if you're furious he's winning this round, and subscribe because her next move's gonna flip this chaos upside down. So, can Kiana claw out of this legal pit before Hargrove buries her for good, or is something even darker waiting around the corner? Stay tuned to see. Kiana Brooks sat shackled in a cell beneath Detroit's central precinct. The walls a dull grey slab, slick with condensation, the air heavy with the stench of bleach and unwashed bodies as a rusty drain gurgled in the corner, swallowing the last of her hope. Her wrists ached under the cuffs, the metal biting deeper than the last time, her grey blouse now torn at the sleeve from the cop's rough takedown in the barber shop, her braids tangled and damp against her neck. She'd been hauled in on prosecutor, Edwin Voss's felony perjury charge, Hargrove's latest dagger, and now she was back in a cage, the lawsuit against him a crumpled dream scattered across that upstairs floor. The cell was smaller than the last, barely 6 feet wide. A concrete bench, her only seat, the cold seeping into her bones as she replayed the arrest, the blogger's phone hitting the ground, her voice cut off mid-sentence. She'd thought the lawsuit was her ace, but Hargrove had turned it into a noose, and here she was dangling. Footsteps echoed down the hall, heavy and deliberate, and a guard loomed at the bars, his face a slab of meat under a buzz cut, his badge glinting as he smirked. "Heard you're a lawyer, huh? Guess Hargrove says your degree's toilet paper now." She glared back, her voice low. "Tell him he's wiping with it wrong." And he laughed, a wet, ugly sound, before slamming a fist against the bars, the clang ricocheting in her skull. Another guard joined, shorter, with a scar slicing his eyebrow, and they traded jabs. She's the one who thought she'd take him down. Yeah, big shot with her fancy words. Kiana's jaw tightened, her mind flashing to the note in her trashed apartment. Hargrove's initials a ghost in the room, and she knew he'd tipped them off, primed them to grind her spirit into dust. They tossed insults like grenades, troublemaker, so ghetto trash, each one laced with a venom that reeked of his influence, but she sat still, her eyes boring holes through them, refusing to crack. How long could she hold out in this pit? Hours bled into a day, then 2, the guards circling like vultures, their taunts a constant drip. But Kiana wasn't alone, not entirely. The Midwest Justice Coalition hadn't abandoned her, and late on the second night, a shadow slipped past the cameras, a janitor with a limp who'd been paid $50 to smuggle in a burner phone, a cheap flip model with a cracked screen. He slid it through the bars, whispering, "From Marcus," and vanished before she could blink. She snatched it, flipping it open, her fingers trembling as she dialed, the signal weak but alive. Marcus picked up, his voice a lifeline. "We're working it, Kai, hold tight." And she hissed back, "They're breaking me, I need ammo." He patched her to a coalition tech, a jittery kid named Sam, who'd rigged a recorder app on the phone, and Kiana got to work. She propped it on the bench, angling it toward the bars, and waited. The next guards patrol her target. When Scarface swaggered by, she goaded him, "Hargrove pay you extra to babysit me?" And he bit, snarling, "He said you're a rat and we squash rats." His words slurring into a rant about uppity kids needing lessons, all caught on tape. She hit send, the file zipping to Sam, and by morning it was live, a grainy audio clip blasting across X. Hargrove's goons target teen attorney, the guard's voice a smoking gun tying him to the judge. Protests reignited outside, horns, blaring, voices chanting her name, the sound faint but piercing through the precinct's thick walls, and Kiana felt a spark, a flicker of fight reigniting. The coalition pounced, filing a habeas corpus writ, arguing the perjury charge lacked evidence and the clip tipped the scales, a judge upstairs grumbling as he signed her release on a technicality, insufficient grounds. By noon, the cell, Tainto swung open, a different guard this time, his eyes avoiding hers as he muttered, "You're out." And she stood, her legs stiff but steady, her smirk cutting through the gloom. "Tell Hargrove I'm not done." She walked free, the precinct's stale air swapping for the sharp bite of autumn, the crowd's roar washing over her as she raised a fist, thinking she'd won, the tape her knockout punch. She crashed at Marcus's place, a basement flat with sagging ceilings, planning her next move, when her phone rang, an unknown number, and she answered. "Who's this?" A voice rasped, "Check your sister's diner," and the line went dead. She bolted, sneakers pounding pavement, 5 miles across town, her lungs burning as she reached the diner, a squat brick joint with a neon sign flickering, "Taste of Home." Smoke billowed from the shattered front window, glass crunching underfoot, flames licking the counter where her sister Nia served pancakes every Sunday. Kiana shoved through the crowd, firefighters shouting, "Back off!" But she saw it. The scorch marks spelling K on the wall, a Molotov cocktail signature, and her knees buckled, Nia's scream cutting through the chaos. "I was inside!" Her sister stumbled out, coughing, singed but alive, and Kiana clutched her, tears streaking her face as the truth sank in. Hargrove had hit back, not at her, but her heart. A voicemail pinged, the same voice. "Next time they burn." And she knew his goons had lit the fuse, his initials from the apartment note now a torch in her hands. She'd walked out of jail grinning, the tape her shield, but Hargrove had turned it into ash, nearly killing her family to prove he'd never yield. Nia sobbed, "Why us?" And Kiana had no answer, just rage, her victory a hollow shell as sirens wailed, the diner's ruins a monument to his wrath. She'd pushed him, exposed his guards, and he'd answered with fire, a strike so personal it tore her open, her sister's safety the price of her defiance. The crowd gawked, phones, filming, but Kiana didn't care. Her mind racing, piecing it back to him, the precinct, the guards, the timing too perfect. She'd thought jail was the breaking point, but this was worse, a line crossed she couldn't unsee. And as she held Nia, the flames crackling behind them, she vowed he'd pay, not just for her, but for this, for everything he'd burned. The lawsuit, the tape, all her wins were dust now, Hargrove's shadow stretching longer, darker, and she realized she'd poked a beast that didn't just bite, it devoured, and this was only the beginning of his hunger. Kiana Brooks crouched in a shadowed corner of a derelict auto shop on Detroit's west side, the air thick with grease and rust, her sneakers silent on the oil-stained concrete, as she watched Tasha, a lanky hacker with a buzz cut and a sleeve of tattoos, hunched over a laptop, its screen casting a blue glow across rusted fenders and shattered headlights. The diner's ashes still clung to her lungs, her sister Nia's screams echoing in her skull. The firebomb's scorch marks a brand on her soul, and Kiana had gone underground, ditching Marcus's basement for this hideout after Hargrove's voicemail promised more blood. Next time they burn. Her grey blouse hung in tatters, swapped for a black hoodie she'd grabbed from a thrift bin. Her braids tucked tight as she leaned closer, whispering, "Find me something to hit him with, Tash." Tasha's fingers danced across the keys, cracking precinct firewalls like eggshells. Her voice a rasp. "Give me 10 minutes, I've got a lead." Kiana nodded, her pulse a drumbeat. The weight of the past week crushing her chest, jail, the felony charge, the diner in flames, all Hargrove's doing, his empire striking back harder every time she swung. She'd walked out of that cell with a taped confession, thought she'd won, but he'd torched her world and now she needed a kill shot. Tasha grinned, sharp and sudden. "Bingo, got a name, Lyle Grayson. Beat cop, off duty last night near the diner. His squad's got a history of dirty jobs." Kiana's eyes narrowed. "Link him to Hargrove, I want proof." Tasha dug deeper, pulling logs from a precinct server, timestamps showing Lyle's unit patrolling her sister's block, hours before the blast, then a burner call to a number tied to Hargrove's old campaign office, a thread thin but gleaming. She hacked a traffic cam, grainy footage flickering. Lyle's cruiser idling near the diner, a gloved hand tossing a bottle, flames erupting as he peeled out. Kiana clenched her fists, nails biting palms. "That's my rope. Let's hang him." They cut the video, audio from the jail clip layered in, Lyle's voice snarling, "Hargrove says squash rats, a damning mashup," and Kiana went live, streaming from Tasha's rig, to a dark web channel the coalition boosted across X, her face. Shadowed but her voice steel. "This is who Judge Hargrove sends to burn us out. Look at your king now." The feed crashed his reappointment hearing that afternoon. A stuffy room in the state capitol, where Hargrove sat smug in a tailored suit, silver hair slicked back, fielding softballs from a panel of grey-haired cronies until the screen behind. Them flared Kiana's video blasting through, Lyle's cruiser, the fire, the confession. A gut punch live on C-SPAN. The room froze, senators gaping, Hargrove's smirk melting as the governor's aide bolted upright, phone buzzing. "What the hell is this?" Protesters outside the courthouse, already simmering from the diner news, erupted, horns blaring, bricks flying, the clip ricocheting online, 10,000 views in an hour, then 50. Kiana watched from the shop, Tasha's screen tracking the chaos, and grinned. "Got you, bastard." The governor, a twitchy man with a comb-over, paused Hargrove's tenure on air. "Pending review," his voice shaking as the panel scrambled, and Kiana cheered, fist bumping Tasha, the auto shop's walls trembling with their laughter. Victory. Tasting sharp and sweet. She'd pinned him, exposed his fixer, turned his own muscle against him, and for a moment she breathed, thinking she'd cracked his spine. But Hargrove didn't bend. He broke the board. By nightfall, as she nursed a lukewarm soda, the city shuddered under his counterstrike, a citywide gang sweep rolling out, sirens screaming, choppers thumping overhead, a blitz targeting black neighborhoods with a fury she'd never seen. Cops in riot gear stormed blocks, kicking doors, cuffing kids for curfew, old men for suspicion, the pretext flimsy but the orders iron, Hargrove's voice crackling over precinct radios. "Clean it up. She's the ringleader." Her face. Hit wanted posters plastered on every pole. Kiana Brooks, gang leader, armed and dangerous. A lie so bold it choked her. She stared at Tasha's screen, live feeds showing armored vans tearing through her old street. A teen she knew tackled, blood pooling under his cheek, and her stomach twisted, the soda can crumpling in her grip. How had he spun her strike into this war? Hargrove had lost the hearing, sure, but he'd flipped it, used her video to paint her a terrorist, a puppet master, and now Detroit was his battlefield, her people the casualties. Tasha cursed. "He's got the mayor, the chief, everyone." And Kiana sank against a fender, the metal cold. Her triumph ashes again, Hargrove's reach deeper than she'd dreamed, his empire not crumbling but clawing back. She'd hit him hard, aired his laundry, and he'd answered with a fist that crushed whole blocks, her name the excuse, her fight the spark he'd turned into a bonfire. The shop's windows rattled as a chopper swooped low, spotlight slashing. The dark. And Kiana ducked, heart pounding. The sweep closing in, her victory a ghost chased by a nightmare. She'd thought Lyle's tape was the endgame, but Hargrove had escalated, not just at her, but at everyone she'd sworn to protect. And now the city bled for it. Her sister's diner, just the first spark in his inferno. She grabbed Tasha. "We move now," her voice tight, the wanted posters burning in her mind, each one a dare she couldn't ignore, Hargrove's game shifting from personal to apocalyptic, and she knew this wasn't a win. It was a trap she'd sprung on herself. Comment number 1 if you're raging at Hargrove turning Kiana's win into a citywide attack, or number 2 if you think she should have stayed quiet after the diner. Hit like if you're hooked on her fight back, and subscribe because this roller coaster's nowhere near done. So with choppers hunting her and Detroit burning, how's Kiana gonna dodge this dragnet and strike back at a judge who's weaponizing a whole city against her? Keep watching to find out. Kiana Brooks darted through a maze of abandoned warehouses on Detroit's riverfront, the night air sharp with the tang of rust and rotting wood, her black hoodie soaked with sweat as she pressed against a crumbling brick wall, her breath fogging. In the October chill while chopper blades thumped overhead, slicing the dark with relentless rhythm. The citywide gang sweep Hargrove had unleashed was a beast with teeth, its jaws snapping at her heels, her face plastered on wanted posters calling her a ringleader, a lie that turned every shadow into a threat. She'd bolted from the auto shop with Tasha hours ago, the hacker's laptop slung in a bag over her shoulder, their hideout too hot as sirens closed in, the sweep tearing through black neighborhoods like a hurricane, leaving busted doors and bruised kids in its wake. Her sneakers skidded on loose gravel, her braids tucked tight under the hood, and she ducked into a cavernous shell of a building, its roof half caved, moonlight spilling through jagged holes onto a floor littered with broken pallets and shattered glass. Tasha had split off. "I'll find Marcus, keep the stream alive," leaving Kiana alone, her pulse a war drum as she sank behind a rusted conveyor belt, the metal cold against her spine. The coalition was fracturing, some bailing under the heat, texts drying up. Too risky, Kai, but she couldn't stop, not with her sister's diner in ashes, not with Hargrove's empire bleeding her city dry. She needed allies, fast, and slipped into a dive bar 2 blocks away. A squat joint called Rusty's with flickering neon and a clientele that didn't ask questions. The air inside was thick with cigarette haze, the jukebox whining a blues riff as she scanned the room, spotting a cluster of rough-edged men nursing beers, their hands scarred, eyes hard, ex-cons Hargrove had chewed up over the years. She slid into their booth, her voice low. "You know me, I'm the one he's hunting, and I know what he did to you." They leaned in, wary but listening. A guy named Dre with a shaved head and a neck tattoo growling, "He gave me 3 years for—" "A dime bag, white kid got a week." Kiana nodded. "Help me, we end him." And they shook on it, a pact forged in shared scars, her new network born in the smoke. They tracked Lyle Grayson, the cop from her video, to a seedy motel off 8 Mile, Kiana leading the ambush with Dre and 2 others, their boots silent on the gravel lot as they cornered him outside room 12, his cruiser parked crooked, a bottle of cheap whiskey in his hand. She stepped from the shadows. "Remember the diner, Lyle?" And he froze, eyes darting. But Dre slammed him against the wall, pinning his arms, while Kiana shoved Tasha's phone in his face, recording, "Talk or we drop you." Lyle squirmed, sweat beading, then cracked. Hargrove called it in, said torch the place, pin it on gangs, make her run. She pressed harder. "Who's next?" And he rasped, "You, he wants you gone, dead or locked." The confession. Burned hot, her finger hitting send. The clip streaming live from a burner account. Hargrove's hitman confesses, blasting across X as Dre tied Lyle's wrists with a zip tie, leaving him slumped against the motel door. The video hit like a bomb, 50,000 views by dawn, riots flaring outside precincts, bricks shattering windows, voices howling her name, and Kiana watched from a new hideout, a gutted factory with cracked skylights, Tasha's screen tracking, the surge. The governor demanded Hargrove's resignation on live TV. "This ends now." His comb-over flapping as he dodged questions, and Kiana exhaled, victorious, the confession her spear in Hargrove's chest, her makeshift crew clapping. Her back, Dre muttering, "We got him, girl." She let herself smile, the weight lifting, thinking she'd turned his sweep into his surrender, the city's rage her shield. But Hargrove didn't bow. He bled redder. As she leaned against a rusted beam, sipping water from a cracked bottle, gunfire split the night, 2 sharp cracks echoing through the factory, and Dre dropped, blood blooming across his chest, his beer bottle shattering beside him. Another shot, and a second ally, Jamal, crumpled, his grunt cut short as a bullet, tore through his throat, red spraying the concrete. Kiana dove behind a stack of crates, heart slamming, glass cutting her palms as she crawled, Tasha's scream piercing the dark. "Snipers!" She peeked out, spotting muzzle flashes from a rooftop across the street, 2 shadows moving, Hargrove's. Loyalists striking back, a message carved in lead, "You're next." Her victory dissolved, the confession's roar drowned by gunfire, her allies dead at her feet, their blood pooling warm and sticky as she pressed against the crates, breath ragged. The choppers circled closer, spotlights slashing, the sweep tightening its grip, and she realized Hargrove had played her again, let her expose Lyle to draw her out, his resignation demand just bait for this kill shot. She'd rallied ex-cons, turned the tide, but he'd answered with bullets not at her yet but at her crew, a warning she'd pushed too far. Tasha grabbed her arm. "We gotta go," and they bolted, slipping through a back exit as boots hit the factory floor. Cops or worse swarming in, their shouts muffled by the ringing in her ears. She stumbled into the night, hoodie snagging on jagged wire, the river's edge glinting ahead. Dre's dead eyes burned into her mind, Jamal's last gasp a choke she couldn't shake. Hargrove hadn't just survived her strike, he'd escalated, turned her win into a slaughter, and now she was running again, the city a war zone, her name a target painted in blood. She'd thought the confession was checkmate, but it was a pawn move, and Hargrove's knights were closing in, their aim sharper, deadlier, her fight costing more than she'd ever bargained for. Kiana Brooks sprinted through Detroit's back alleys, her sneakers pounding wet asphalt, the riverfront's damp chill clinging to her black hoodie as she clutched Tasha's arm. The hacker's breath ragged after their escape from the factory, sniper bullets still ringing in their ears, Dre and Jamal's blood a fresh stain on her mind. The city pulsed with chaos, choppers buzzing low, their spotlights slashing the dark. Hargrove's gang sweep, a relentless machine hunting her. Her name a curse on every wanted poster, tacked to crumbling walls. She'd lost 2 allies, their bodies cooling on that factory floor. And the weight of it crushed her chest, but she didn't stop, couldn't, not with Hargrove's empire still standing, his snipers, his latest fangs. She and Tasha ducked into a storm drain, the stink of stagnant water choking them as they crouched, plotting their next strike, her voice a hiss. "He's bleeding us out, we hit him public now." Tasha nodded, her buzz cut damp with sweat. "City councils tonight, big shots, cameras, perfect stage." Kiana gripped Lyle's confession tape, the motel clip burned to a USB in her pocket, her ace after the factory ambush, and she knew it was time to swing hard. They slipped out at dusk, hoods up, weaving through side streets until they hit the municipal building. A squat limestone block buzzing with suits and press, the council meeting already underway. Kiana shoved through the double doors, Tasha at her heels, her sneakers squeaking on polished tile as she stormed the chamber. A wood-paneled room packed with councillors in stiff chairs, their faces pinched as they droned about budgets. She didn't wait for an invite, slamming the USB onto the speaker's table, her voice cutting through the hum. "Play this or I scream it. Your judge is a murderer." Gasps rippled, a councillor with a grey moustache barking, "Who are you?" But she shot back, "Kiana Brooks, the one he's framing, and this is his confession." The room froze, a clerk fumbling the USB into a laptop, and the screen flared, Lyle's slurred voice spilling out. "Hargrove said torch the place, pin it on gangs, make her run." The motel footage raw and unfiltered, followed by the jail, audio, squash rats. The councillors gaped, a woman in a blue blazer clutching her pearls, the press in the back scrambling for phones, cameras rolling as Kiana stood tall, her braids spilling free. "He burned my sister's diner, shot." "My friends, he's no judge, he's a thug with a gavel." The chamber erupted, shouts clashing, a bald councillor slamming his fist. "This is outrageous." But the vote came fast, 7-3. Suspend Hargrove, effective now. Cops swarmed in, not for her this time, but for him. Hargrove dragged, from a side room where he'd been lurking, his silver hair wild, his suit rumpled, ranting, "You can't do this," as cuffs snapped on, his eyes locking with Kiana's, pure hate boiling there. She stood firm, chest heaving, thinking she'd won, the tape her sword, his suspension her crown, the press snapping her triumph, headlines already brewing, judge cuffed in courtroom chaos. She exhaled, victory sharp on her tongue. The councillors' stunned faces her trophy, Hargrove's empire cracking under her heel. But he didn't break, he bent the game again. As she turned to leave, Tasha whispering, "We did it." A call buzzed from an unknown number, a voice she knew. Voss, the prosecutor, smooth and cold, "Check the news." She flicked her phone on, heart sinking as Channel 8 flashed. State Senate overrides suspension, grants Hargrove emergency powers, his allies upstate flexing, reinstating him with a stroke of a pen, a legal coup that hit like a brick. Kiana's knees wobbled, the chamber's cheers fading, her win a ghost as Tasha cursed, "They bought him back." She stumbled outside, the night air slapping her face, and the blow landed harder, sirens wailing as a SWAT team roared up. Black. Fans disgorging armored figures, their boots a thunderclap on the plaza. They'd tracked her, Hargrove's orders now supercharged, and before she could bolt they struck tear gas canisters hissing, clouds choking her lungs as batons swung, one cracking her ribs, another slamming her skull, pain exploding white-hot. She hit the ground, asphalt biting her cheek, the councillors scattering as cameras caught it live. Fugitive Kiana Brooks captured, the feed blasting nationwide, her victory twisted into a public beating, a spectacle to break her spirit. Blood trickled from her brow, her hoodie shredded, and she gasped, "This is him." But the mics didn't catch it, the SWAT team's shouts drowning her, "Stay down, terrorist." They zip-tied her wrists, yanking her up, her legs buckling as they dragged her to a van. The city watching her fall, Hargrove's smirk invisible but felt, his emergency powers a hammer, smashing her crown to dust. She'd stormed in, taped him, won the vote, and he'd flipped it, turned her stage into his gallows, the suspension a feint to lure her out, his real play, this brutal takedown. The van door slammed, her face pressed to the glass, the plaza blurring, and she knew he'd baited her again, let her taste triumph so he could rip it away, his snipers just the warm-up for this public execution of her fight. Her ribs throbbed, her vision swam, but her mind burned, replaying the council's shock. The cuffs on Hargrove now meaningless, his allies too deep, too fast, turning her sword into a shackle. She'd thought she'd pinned him, but he'd pinned her, the city his chessboard, her every move a step into his trap. Comment number 1. If you're stunned. Hargrove flipped Kiana's big win into a SWAT beatdown. Or number 2. If you think she should have seen his allies coming. Hit like if you're on edge for her comeback, and subscribe because this fight's twisting into something wilder every second. So, with Kiana cuffed and battered, how's she gonna break free from Hargrove's iron grip? Or is this the knockout punch she can't dodge? Stay locked in to find out. Kiana Brooks jolted awake in the back of a SWAT van, her ribs screaming with every breath, the taste of blood coppery on her tongue as the vehicle rumbled over Detroit's potholed streets, her wrists zip-tied tight behind her, cutting into bruised skin beneath her shredded black hoodie. The tear gas lingered in her lungs, a burning fog, her head throbbing from the baton that had cracked her skull outside the council chamber. The city's cheers for Hargrove's suspension, now a distant echo drowned by the SWAT team's boots and shouts. She'd been hauled off live on air, her face a battered mask for the world to see. Hargrove's emergency powers turning her victory into a public flogging, and now she was trapped, the van's steel walls a coffin rolling toward some precinct. Black sight. Her vision blurred, one eye swelling shut, but she forced it clear, spotting 2 cops up front, their helmets off, laughing about, teaching her a lesson, their radios crackling with orders she couldn't hear. She twisted, testing the ties, pain flaring, when tires screeched outside, a jolt rocking the van as something slammed its side, metal groaning, the driver cursing, "What the hell?" Another crash, harder, and the van swerved, fishtailing. As glass shattered, a stolen pickup truck ramming full force Tasha at the wheel, her buzz cut glinting in the streetlights. Kiana seized it, rolling to her knees as the van spun, the cops shouting, fumbling guns, and she kicked the rear door, once, twice, the lock buckling as Tasha's third hit flipped the van onto its side, a screeching slide across asphalt. She tumbled, slamming the wall, but the door popped loose and she crawled out, zip ties snapping as she snagged a jagged edge, her hands free, blood slick on her palms. Tasha leapt from the truck. "Move!" And they bolted, weaving through a maze of alleys, the cops dazed behind them, sirens swelling as backup closed in. Kiana's ribs stabbed with every step, her breath a rasp, but she ran, Tasha dragging her into a condemned tenement, its stairs sagging, walls tagged with faded graffiti, a temporary cave to catch their wind. She sank against a splintered beam, gasping, "Thanks," and Tasha smirked. Couldn't let him win yet. They didn't rest long, Tasha pulling her laptop from a bag, its screen cracked but glowing as she hacked into offshore accounts she'd been chasing since the diner. Fire, her fingers flying. "Hargrove's dirty, I've got a thread." Kiana leaned in, her swollen eye squinting as Tasha unearthed a gold mine. Bank records from the Caymans, millions funneled through shell companies, tied to a hate group called White Dawn, their logo a jagged cross she'd seen on old case files. Payments traced to Hargrove's personal account, a bribe trail for his vendetta. She hissed, "This is it, his spine," and Tasha nodded. Enough to bury him. They leaked it fast, emailing every news outlet from a burner IP, PDFs flooding inboxes. Judge Hargrove funded by hate group. The docs showing dates, amounts. White Dawn's manifesto calling for purging the streets. Hargrove's signature on a transfer memo. By morning it hit. Headlines screaming, Hargrove's secret millions. X exploding with screenshots. Protests swelling outside precincts. Tires burning, voices roaring. Take him down! Kiana watched from the tenement's broken window. Glass crunching under her sneakers. The city's pulse quickening, and Tasha grinned. We crashed his castle. The state senate flipped. His emergency powers revoked. The governor yanking his bench again. He's done. A live feed showing Hargrove's office raided. Files seized. His silver hair wild as he raged at marshals. Kiana danced, a limping twirl. Her ribs protesting but her spirit soaring. The leak her cannon blast, his credibility ash, the hate group tie a noose he couldn't slip. She hugged Tasha. We got him, thinking she'd finally snapped his neck. The city hers again, justice clawing free. But Hargrove didn't crumble, he crushed back harder. As she slumped against the wall, sipping water from a dented flask, her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Turn on TV now. She flicked it on, a shaky stream from Channel 8. Voss at a podium, his wiry frame taut. Kiana Brooks is a domestic terrorist, linked to White Dawn, inciting chaos. A federal. Warrant flashing, her name atop most wanted, a terrorism charge that stopped her heart. The screen cut to a press conference, a federal judge, Hargrove's golf buddy nodding grimly. She's a threat to the nation. The leak twisted. Her evidence flipped to frame her as the mastermind, not him. Kiana's flask hit the floor. Water pooling. Her victory a mirage as Tasha cursed. He bribed the feds, turned it on us. Protests shifted, some turning sour. She's one of them. Posters burning her face now, not his. The city splitting, half raging for her, half against. Hargrove's lie, a venom spreading fast. She thought she'd won. The account's her. Trump card, but he'd played it back. His empire too deep, too wide. Bribing a judge to slap her with a rap that made the sweep look tame. Helicopters thumped closer. Boots echoed in the streets. The tenement trembling as feds closed in. Her name America's enemy overnight. Hargrove's smirk invisible, but choking her. She'd crashed his world, sure, but he'd crashed hers bigger, turning her cannon into his catapult, her fighter-terrorist flag he'd waved to bury her. Tasha grabbed her. We run now. And they slipped out a back window, glass cutting her arm, the city a war zone, her win a trap she'd built herself. Hargrove's reach a shadow she couldn't outrun, not yet. Kiana Brooks crouched in a rusted trailer, parked behind a gas station off a rural Michigan highway. Her black hoodie swapped for a stained jacket Tasha had scavenged from a dumpster, her breath shallow as she nursed cracked ribs, the sting of her escape from the SWAT van, a dull ache under fresh cuts from the tenement glass. The terrorism charge Hargrove had pinned on her blared from every radio, her face splashed across America's screens. Most wanted, a lie that turned her. Leak of his White Dawn funds into her own noose, the nation hunting her coast to coast. She and Tasha had bolted from Detroit, the city a furnace of feds and fury, her name splitting the streets, half cheering her as a hero, half cursing her as a traitor. Hargrove's federal judge twisting her truth into a nightmare. The trailer smelled of mold and motor oil, its walls paper thin, the hum of semis outside a shaky cover as Tasha rigged an encrypted stream from a battered laptop, her buzz cut damp with sweat, muttering, "We've got one shot, Kai." Kiana nodded, her swollen eye twitching. "Then we take them all down." She rallied her network via dark web channels, the ex-cons from Rusty's, Marcus back in the city, scattered coalition remnants, their voices crackling through static. "We're with you," a patchwork army forged in Hargrove's wreckage. Tasha hacked deeper, pulling files from White Dawn servers, donor lists unmasking CEOs, a senator, a media mogul, Hargrove's puppeteers, millions funneled to his account, their names a map of his empire's spine. Kiana streamed it live, her voice hoarse but fierce. "These are the real terrorists, not me." The feed bouncing across X, TikTok, every platform she could hit, screenshots of bank transfers, emails plotting her frame-up, a senator's signature on a memo greenlighting. The diner fire. The nation froze, phones buzzing, protests flaring from LA to NYC, tires screeching, chants swelling. Kiana's right, Hargrove's done. She watched from the trailer, Tasha's screen-tracking views, 1 million in an hour, then 5. The FBI scrambling as tips flooded in. Raid them, not her. Agents hit White Dawn's offices, a sleek tower in Chicago, glass shattering as they stormed, seizing drives, cuffing suits, the senator's face pale on live TV. I've been set. Up a lie no one bought. Hargrove's allies ditched him. The governor cutting ties. The Senate reversing his powers again, an indictment dropping fast. Conspiracy, racketeering. His name a headline sinking fast. Kiana danced in the trailer, a limping shuffle. Her ribs groaning but her spirit blazing. Tasha clapping, we snapped their neck. The city's roar reached her through shaky streams. Precincts swarmed. Hargrove's empire collapsing under her weight. The leak, her final spear. His puppeteers exposed, their millions useless now. She hugged Tasha. We did it, her voice. Cracking, victory tasting raw and real. The nation waking up, her terrorism rap unraveling as feds turned on their own. But Hargrove didn't fade. He flared one last time. As she sank onto a milk crate sipping stale water, the trailer shook, a deafening roar splitting the night, windows shattering as drones swooped low, bombs raining, fireballs erupting across the lot. The gas station igniting in a mushroom of flame, shrapnel slicing the air. Kiana dove, tackling Tasha behind a rusted fridge, her ears ringing as the trailer buckled, walls folding, heat searing her back, a drone strike from Hargrove's loyalists, his final claw at her throat. She crawled from the rubble, coughing. Blood? Her jacket smoldering. Tasha groaning beside her, alive but dazed. The highway a chaos of screams and sirens, the station's pumps a inferno lighting the dark. Her phone was gone, crushed, but she staggered upright, scanning the wreckage, her sister Nia's face flashing in her mind. Where is she? The diner fire, the snipers, now this. Hargrove's vendetta a beast that wouldn't die, and she realized Nia wasn't with Marcus, wasn't safe, missing in the storm she'd unleashed. The indictment had hit, sure, his allies were falling, but he'd burned her world again. Drones his last gasp, her victory a pyre costing her family, her sister vanished in the chaos he'd sown. She stumbled through the debris, legs shaking, the flames painting her shadow long and jagged, Tasha shouting, "We gotta move!" But Kiana froze, the weight crashing down, her fight toppling giants but losing Nia, the one piece she'd sworn to protect. Hargrove's empire was dust, his indictment sealed, but this strike was personal, a blade through her heart, her sister's absence a void she couldn't fill. She'd rallied a nation, exposed the rot, but the drones had flipped it, turned, her triumph into ash, her network scattered, her hideout a grave, and Nia's fate a question clawing her gut. The highway glowed red, fire trucks racing in, and Kiana sank to her knees, hands digging dirt. The victory she'd danced for a ghost now, Hargrove's shadow stretching even from his cell, his loyalists striking blind but true, her war costing more than she'd ever bargained. Kiana Brooks stumbled through the smouldering wreckage of the gas station lot, her sneakers crunching charred asphalt, the acrid sting of burning rubber searing her lungs as she pulled Tasha from the rubble, the hacker's buzz, cut streaked with soot, her arm limp but her eyes sharp, whispering, "I'm okay, go." The drone strike had gutted their trailer hideout, a fiery claw from Hargrove's loyalists, her sister Nia missing in the chaos, a void gnawing at Kiana's core as she scanned the highway, flames licking the night sky, sirens wailing in the distance. Her jacket hung in tatters, her ribs a lattice of pain, but she pushed on, Tasha limping behind, the indictment of Hargrove a hollow win with Nia gone, the nation's protests a roar she couldn't hear over her own panic. She tracked him to his mansion, a sprawling estate 20 miles north of Detroit, its iron gates glinting under floodlights, a fortress for a fallen king. Marcus had texted a tip. He's holed up, feds closing in. And Kiana moved fast, hitching a ride with a trucker who didn't ask questions, her mind a storm of Nia's laugh, the diner's ashes, every blow Hargrove had landed. She slipped past security, scaling a back wall with Tasha's help, thorns tearing her palms as she dropped into a manicured garden, the mansion's windows dark but alive, shadows moving inside. She found him in his study, a wood-panelled cave stinking of whiskey and cigars. Hargrove slumped in a leather chair, his silver hair wild, a glass trembling in his hand, his suit wrinkled like a discarded skin. He looked up, eyes bloodshot, and sneered, "You're a ghost who won't die." His voice a gravelly slur, but Kiana stepped closer, her sneakers silent on the rug. "Where's my sister?" He laughed, a wet rasp. "You think you've won, you've got nothing left." She pulled Tasha's cracked phone from her pocket, hitting record, her voice steel. "Tell me, or this goes live, your last confession." Hargrove's smirk faltered, his hand twitching, and he spat. "I rigged it, had her grabbed after the drone's leverage to shut you up," pointing to a cellar door behind a bookshelf. "She's down there alive for now." Kiana's heart leapt, but she kept the phone steady. "Keep talking, who's next?" He leaned forward, gloating. "You'll never outlast me, girl. My people run deeper than you'll ever dig." His words a venomous thread, the tape catching. Every syllable as she aired it live. Streaming to X from a burner signal Tasha boosted outside. Hargrove admits kidnapping, vows revenge. The nation erupted, screens flashing, protests surging anew. "Free Naya, end him." As Kiana bolted to the cellar, kicking the door wide, its hinges groaning, and found Nia, bound but breathing, her eyes wide with relief. "Kai!" She cut the ropes, hugging her tight, tears soaking Nia's shoulder. "I've got you." The reunion, a lifeline in the wreckage. Federal marshals stormed in minutes later, tires screeching on the driveway, boots pounding marble as they burst the study door, Hargrove screaming, "This is my house." But cuffs snapped on, his gavel days dust, his rant live for millions, his empire's collapse sealed in real time. Kiana led Nia out, the mansion swarming with feds, flashlights slashing the dark, Hargrove's glare burning her back as they dragged him to a van, his smirk twisting even in chains. "This isn't over," a hiss that chilled her spine. She stood on the lawn, Nia trembling beside her. The night air cool against her cuts, victory bitter but real, his confession her hammer, his jail cell her prize. She'd tracked him, taped him, saved Nia, and crashed his world, the nation watching. Headlines blazing, Judge Hargrove arrested, teen attorney prevails. But as they limped to Marcus's waiting car, a call buzzed from an unknown number, a voice she didn't know, smooth and cold. "His empire's down, not dead, check your email." And it clicked off, her stomach sinking. She opened it on Tasha's. Phone, a single line. "White Dawn still breathing, watch your back." And she froze, the wind souring. Hargrove's smirk from the van, a ghost in her mind, hinting at a shadow bigger than him, a fight she'd only begun. She'd stormed his lair, freed her sister, toppled his throne. But this call was a crack in her crown, his loyalists or worse lurking. Nia's safety her anchor, but the war stretching wider, deeper, a beast she'd wounded, but not killed. The Marshall's lights faded. The mansion loomed dark, and Kiana squeezed Nia's hand, her voice a whisper. "We're not done." The tape her weapon, his arrest her step, but the email a door she hadn't opened. Hargrove's fall a battle won, not the war. Kiana Brooks stood outside Hargrove's mansion, the dawn breaking grey and cold over the sprawling estate, her sneakers sinking into dew-soaked grass as federal marshals hauled the judge away, his silver hair a tangled mess, his wrists cuffed, his final smirk still searing her mind despite the chaos of the night. Nia leaned against her, shivering in a borrowed coat, her wrists raw from ropes, the cellar's damp chill lingering in her bones, but alive, safe. A miracle Kiana clutched, tight as the marshal's vans peeled out, tires crunching gravel, their red lights fading into the pines. The air buzzed with press, a swarm descending on the lawn, microphones thrusting toward her, cameras flashing, reporters shouting, "Kiana, what's next?" But she waved them off, her voice hoarse. Justice isn't done yet. Her ribs aching, her jacket torn. The drone strike scars a map of pain across her skin. She'd faced Hargrove in his study hours ago, taped his rant, aired his confession live. I rigged it, had her grabbed, the nation erupting as marshals stormed. In his empire crumbling under her hammer, Nia freed from that cellar, a victory she'd fought through fire and blood to claim. The headlines hit fast. Hargrove arrested teen attorney topples judge. X ablaze with her name, protests swelling nationwide. White Dawn's donors cuffed, their towers raided, the senator's career ash, her leak from the trailer a spear. That had pierced them all. She led Nia to Marcus's beat-up sedan, Tasha waiting inside, her buzz cut streaked with dirt, handing over a USB. "Found this in his desk while you were downstairs." Her voice low, urgent. Kiana plugged it into Tasha's cracked laptop, the screen flickering as files loaded. Encrypted emails, bank logs, a shadow network deeper than White Dawn, names she didn't know but recognized the weight of, power players beyond Hargrove. His puppeteers. Her stomach twisted. The email from the unknown caller echoing, his empire's down, not dead. And here it was, proof he'd been a pawn, a loudmouth with a gavel, not the king. She rebuilt Nia's diner in her mind, a plan forming as they drove back to Detroit. The city waking to her win, streets quieter now, the sweep lifted, Hargrove's indictment a lock, his trial weeks away but inevitable, conspiracy, kidnapping, racketeering, a life sentence looming. They reached the diner's ruins by noon, a charred husk on a corner lot, and Kiana stood there, Nia beside her, vowing, "We start over, right here," a symbol of defiance she'd fund with coalition. Cash donations still trickling in, her fight a beacon. Tasha handed her the USB again. "This is bigger, Kai," and she opened it fully, files spilling out, a senator's name jumping, not the one they'd nabbed, but another. Higher, a quiet giant who'd watched Hargrove fall, his signature on a memo, "Eliminate Brooks if she digs," dated before the drones. Kiana's breath caught, her victory flipping. Hargrove's smirk in the van not defiance but a taunt, a pawn's last laugh for a king still standing. She scanned the horizon, Detroit's skyline jagged against the sky, and spotted a news van. Channel 8 airing live, the anchor's voice drifting, "Kiana Brooks, hero or hunted?" as the camera panned, catching a figure on a rooftop across the street, a suit, no face, watching her, his stillness a blade in her gut. Tasha followed her gaze. Who's that? But Kiana knew, felt it. The senator, or his shadow, the real kingpin, White Dawn's head, not its hands. A man who'd let Hargrove burn to keep his own throne dark. She grinned, a fierce, reckless thing, whispering, "I'm coming for you." Her voice a vow to the air, the USB her new spear, Hargrove's fall a stepping stone, not the summit. The press swarmed closer, mics jabbing, "Kiana, what's your plan?" And she faced them, Nia's hand in hers. "Keep fighting, rebuild, expose the rest." Her words steady, the diner's ashes her stage, the senator's shadow her target. She toppled a judge, saved her sister, cracked an empire, but this twist rewrote it all. Hargrove a loud distraction, the real war sprawling wider, deeper, a titan watching her from a rooftop, smiling as she danced on his board. She squeezed Nia's hand. "We're safe for now." But her eyes flicked up, the figure gone, the USB warm in her pocket, a ticking bomb for a fight just beginning. The nation cheered her, sure, headlines crowned her, but the senator's memo burned in her mind, "Eliminate Brooks," a threat she'd meet head-on, her war not won but redefined. Hargrove's cell a footnote, the true beast still breathing. Her grin a dare, the diner her flag, the next battle hers to wage. Kiana Brooks's journey in racist judge humiliates black teen, then learns she's an attorney, sent to investigate him, offers raw, powerful lessons about resilience, justice, and the cost of fighting systemic racism. First, it shows that courage isn't just facing a foe, but standing tall when the world turns against you. Kiana, a 19-year-old black attorney, took on Judge Victor Hargrove's 30-year reign of bias, enduring jail, violence, and betrayal, proving that one voice can spark a revolution, even when it's drowned in lies. Second, the story reveals the depth of systemic rot. Hargrove wasn't the root but a branch, his power propped by a hidden network of hate, teaching us that dismantling injustice means digging beyond the surface, past the pawns to the kings. Third, it underscores the personal toll of defiance. Kiana lost her home, her sister's diner, and nearly her life, a brutal reminder that victories against racism often come with scars. Yet, her unwavering grit, flipping every setback into a strike, shows that strength lies in adapting, not breaking. Finally, the twist ending, with a senator lurking as the true titan, warns that winning a battle doesn't end the war. Justice is a marathon, not a sprint. Kiana's story isn't just a tale, it's a mirror for our world, urging us to question who pulls the strings and to keep pushing when the fight gets uglier. So what would you sacrifice to expose a racist system? Drop number 1 in the comments if you'd fight like Kiana, or number 2 if you'd wait for backup. Hit like if her grit inspires you, subscribe for more real stories, and share to spread her fire. Thanks for riding this wild journey with us. Here's to chasing justice one truth at a time and wishing you the strength to stand when it counts.